Hi everyone, welcome to day 102 of my art development series. If this is your first time here, my name is Andrew Wren, and this is a series that I'm doing where I kind of document my everyday art process. And if you're just finding the series now, today we're actually doing something a little bit different. So generally, each of these videos, I kind of do a drawing specifically for that day, and then I offer a time lapse and kind of talk about it or talk about some topic related to art. But today we have something a little bit different. So yesterday I attended a figure drawing class at the Art Students League in New York. I recently enrolled in a class with the artist Greg Kreutz, who we're going to talk about, I think, a little bit more in this series. I might even do some master copies of his work and talk about why I chose to take this particular course. But just generally, what we ended up doing in the course yesterday was, over the course of 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, we did a life drawing session. So we started with a few short poses of 2 minutes and 5 minutes, and then built our way up to 10 minutes, and then eventually 20-minute poses. So actually what's behind me now and what's on the screen is a 20-minute pose that I did from life during that course. And I really want to share this process with you and share some of my life drawings. Unfortunately, I can't record live while we're in the classroom for obvious reasons. You can't have a camera recording while you're doing a nude life drawing session. But instead, what I'm trying to do is figure out like the best medium that I can try and share these a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do today is I will actually turn the camera around, so you won't be seeing my face, but I will kind of go through each of the drawings that I did and just talk a little bit about the process, about the time, about what I was thinking about, and we can just kind of, do like a little recap or a little critique together of those pieces, and that's how I'll kind of share this experience. And I'm doing life drawing sessions a minimum of 1 time a week. I would like to do it a little bit more, and I think I'll probably share them most of the time in this way. We'll kind of experiment and figure out what's the best medium for doing so. But now I'll switch over to the drawings and we can go through some of the sketches I did last night. Okay, so these are some of the first drawings that I did after the warm-up period. So I think this was actually a 3-minute pose, and then here's where we actually started getting into something that was more substantial. I believe this was a 10-minute, but I can't quite remember. And so I actually quite liked how this drawing came out. So you can see there was kind of this nice elegant pose by the model with like the hand on the hip, and kind of this leg extended this direction. And I feel that the pose is actually captured pretty well. She also had this like really big hair that was, I think, actually really cool and added this nice dark element that you could always kind of put at the top of the drawing, which is something that I might try and steal or replicate for future use. So one thing that I was really trying to emphasize, because it's kind of in Greg Kreutz's style, was the use of shadow. So I was kind of getting quicker to blocking in shadows than I normally would. So if you're kind of following an approach that's like more like an a Jeff Watts approach or a Stan Prokopenko approach, you take much more time on the lay-in or the block-in before you start adding shadows. But Greg Kreutz kind of has this like looser style that he promotes where you actually start to get into the blocking of the shadows quicker than you normally would. And so that's why, even though it's not a finished block-in, I actually have the shadow shapes. And I kind of like this balance between blocking in and adding shadow shapes early. So it's something I'm going to be experimenting more in my art practice. So these are also both 10-minute drawings. This one I kind of got a little bit too caught up getting the proportions correct and getting things in the right place, and so I kind of lost a lot of time just setting things up and didn't really get as far. It doesn't look like 10 minutes worth of drawing, let's say, just because like the angle, I was just having some tough time like lining up some of these different proportions of the body. But overall, not horrible, not super unsuccessful. I think the pose is decently communicated. And again, we have like kind of this like nice shadow shape or this nice dark shape that comes in here for the hair. Things that I would like to fix would be this area here. And it was a little bit lazy to just kind of throw that whole arm into shadow, I think, even though it wasn't exactly like that in practice. This is the first drawing that I did that I actually really started to like. So you can see I was like pretty early with blocking in the shadows. So I kept picking up on a few different ones. So underneath the, kind of in the pelvis area, underneath the belly, underneath the breast, I was always finding these nice shadows. It was because the lighting was coming from above. And then of course, like on the neck here, like this. This pose was like a little bit stiff, like the arm hanging down here. Maybe it would have been nicer with like a little more, being like a little more dynamic like that. Or if I would have actually found something more dynamic or I just added it. So I have this like shoulder tilt here, and I could have contrasted that maybe a little bit better with like the, the hips going in the opposite direction here. Also, I think the head is a little bit too small, and I lost things a little bit here in the feet. But I think this is really just because, I'm spending more time on shadows and not as much time as blocking in. So I'm almost never going to have a full block in, even in a 10-minute drawing. After this is when we switched to 20 minutes. And I would say that this was actually my favorite drawing that I did of the day. I really like the pose. I really like the kind of like use of clothing that we had here. And I just felt like I was able to fit everything in and more or less capture the things that I wanted. So in general, I was, as I said, trying to focus on getting in the shadow shapes and before the block in was complete. And I did end up doing that. And I got this really nice critique from Greg, though, about this area here, where he commented on the kind of darkness of these lines. He mentioned, and I actually ended up lightening them. They were much darker before. I kind of had this like really dark line there. But he talked about, trying to keep things really, really light in the shadow area. So when you're using this technique of blocking in shadows, kind of like, massing them in a dark way, you want to make sure that they're distinct from the light areas as much as possible. And so the dark areas, like here, must be darker than everything else that shows up in the flesh. So if you add a kind of a really dark line here that matches the darkness here, it kind of loses some of its believability or some of its elegance, because you have this like contrast, not enough contrast between the light area and the dark area. And so this is something that I've really been hearing a lot about recently that I want to continue to kind of explore and play with, which is about keeping things as dark as I can in the darks and keeping them as light as I can in the lights. And then this is the last drawing that I did. I must admit, by this period, I was actually pretty tired, so I kind of got a little lazy. I tried to say that it was going to be style, that I was going to kind of leave both of these limbs unfinished, but it looks less stylized and looks a little bit more just like it wasn't finished. But otherwise, I actually think like the torso area is kind of handled nicely. I think I could have done probably like, let's see, we can probably fix some things here, add like a little more consistency, like a little more shape there. Maybe even something, let's just fix this a little bit. Let's see what we can do. Just to add like a little shape. Give it a little more definition. And even we'll round this and we can get a nice turn here. Maybe something like that. But anyway, by this point, I was a little bit tired and I think got a little lazy in some areas. But otherwise, more practice of this idea of using shadow shapes early. Like one thing that did come out nice is this whole area in here. And this was only possible because I went early to shadow shapes, as opposed to if I would have spent the whole time doing block-ins, you would literally just have this outline. I would have spent, additional time here and here and here, and we wouldn't have really had anything interesting to look at. And so that's all of the drawings that I did this time. Let's experiment a little bit with how I can best share the drawings that I did, since I can't record them live, and we'll figure out kind of ways to talk about figure drawing and talk about life drawing in the future. But I hope that this inspired you to draw today, and if not, there's always later today if you're watching this and you're still awake, or tomorrow, because we will see each other for day 103.